Motivational Monday. My name is Gail Davis, and I will be serving as your host. Today, our guest is Kevin Brown. Kevin is passionate about helping people and organizations embrace a philosophy that really celebrates world-class organization and high-performance people from everybody else. And Kevin refers to this as the hero effect. He inspires people, he challenges people to show up every day and make a positive difference in work and in life. GDA Speakers has booked Kevin over 60 times, which makes him one of our Gold Star speakers. A reminder to those of you who have joined us before, and to those of you who are new, we invite your interaction. So please go to the Q&A area below and type in your questions. And as I see those questions populate, I'll be calling on them. So let's get this started. I want to say welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Gail, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing just great. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, Kevin, one of the places that I would like to start, I know you talk to hundreds of people, and I also know that you come out of corporate America. You have a long career working in corporate. And I'm just curious what you're seeing in terms of how people are adjusting and adapting during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's been interesting. We've spent, the last 4 years, we've been in front of over 500 organizations and literally thousands of people around the world. And, when COVID-19 happened, obviously nobody saw this coming. We didn't challenge this season that we're in has forced a lot of things to happen. And the companies that I work with, the high performance people that I work with, they are using this as an opportunity to get better. And there's really two different types of organizations emerging right now. Those that are just trying to hold on, those that are just kind of hunkered down to ride this out. And then there's another group of organizations that have said, look, what do we need to do to not only prepare for this season we're in, but to come out of this stronger? What's happening is the pandemic has revealed a lot of weaknesses in our business. My business is no different. There's a lot of things that I should have been working on during the good times to be better prepared to handle the bad times. I should have diversified my business. I should have been learning about technology and doing virtual events long before I was forced to. So I think a lot of organizations, a lot of people are getting better as a result of this. And now that we've kind of gotten our legs underneath us, we're starting to hit our stride a little bit and saying, okay, we're going to get through this. This is a season. We're going to get through this and we're going to be better for it.
I love that. Okay, the hero effect. Why did you start talking about heroes in the first place?
It was actually an accident. It more than a decade. Yeah, it picked me. I did not pick it. I'm an introvert by nature. I don't like to speak in front of crowds and I don't like to fly on airplanes. So last year I flew 250,000 miles and spoke to over 200,000 people. So sometimes life has other plans for us. And I was asked over a decade ago to speak to an organization. 2,000 people were going to be in the room and they specifically said, look, we want you to do something different. We don't want a stock speech. We don't want to hear about leadership, vision, communication, all that stuff. All that stuff is great, but we've kind of been there and done that. We want you to say something special to this group. We want you to inspire them, move them, celebrate them. Kevin, a lot of these folks are considered to be heroes by our customers. And when they used the word heroes, I wrote it down. I'll never forget. I circled it. I underlined it. They kept talking. I don't remember a lot of what they said after they used the word heroes. And then I opened my mouth and I said, how about if I give a speech about what it means to be a hero? To be the best when it matters the most, to bring a new version of yourself to work every single day and pour it into the people that you serve and serve with. And they said, man, if you could do that, that would be brilliant. And they left the room and I completely freaked out, had a meltdown, had no idea what I was going to talk about. I had 3 months to get ready for the event. And from that day till now, my life has never been the same. I've been chasing one question for more than a decade, and that's, what does a hero look like? And here we are today.
Isn't your son, Josh, one of your heroes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Josh is one of my biggest heroes. His mom is one of my biggest heroes. I married a real life Wonder Woman, and she always tells me before I get on an event like this or before I walk on stage, the last thing she always tells me is don't forget to smile. She tells me all the time, I've got a really poor resting face. I look angry most of the time. She said, I look like security more than I look like a speaker. And so before we go any further, I just need to do this for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so now she'll be satisfied because she'll see the replay of this and she'll want to know if I smiled. So I've smiled. So Now we can move on with the content. But it's really interesting, Gail. I started talking about heroes, and after I had my meltdown, trying to decide what am I really going to talk about? I mean, we talk about heroes in society. We turn on the news, we get online today, and we hear words like heroes. We hear words like essential workers. We hear these words now because it's top of mind and we're in the midst of this global pandemic. But back then, I wrote that question down. What does a hero look like? We use it to describe high performance people, great organizations, but what does it really mean to be a hero? And I had no idea. I was staring at a blank yellow pad and I had no idea what I was going to talk about. And I'll never forget, I went to my wife and I said, her name's Lisa. We've been married for 24 years. I do everything she tells me to do because I'm afraid she might leave. And she always has great advice for me. And I went to her and I said, honey, I've got to give a speech. I've got to be ready in 3 months for 2,000 people. And they want me to talk about heroes and I don't have a hero speech. And she said, I'll never forget. She said, if you want to talk about heroes, she said, just tell them your story. Tell them about your life. She said, your life is decorated by heroes. There's heroes all throughout your life story. And she said, in fact, if you want to talk about heroes, why don't you go look in the mirror? And I was flattered at first. And she said, I'm not done yet. She said, when you're done staring at yourself, she said, I want you to see the people who are standing there with you. She said, if you look in the mirror and only see yourself, she said, you're missing the picture completely. She said, you're not a self-made man. You didn't get here by yourself. She said, you're the sum total and the byproduct of every single human being who's ever shown up in your life. Some for a minute and some for a lifetime. People who gave you something you didn't have on your own. She said, if you want to talk about heroes, just start there.
Oh.
I told you she's a smart woman. And I'll never forget, I went to the mirror and I stared at myself for an uncomfortable amount of time. And after a while, my image began to fade. I started to see the faces of all of the influencers, preachers, teachers, friends, family, colleagues, strangers, people who had shown up in my life and took me places I could have never gotten to on my own. And when I wrote that question down, what does a hero look like? I started asking anybody who would listen. I've asked thousands of people that one question. And everybody, they all say the same things. We talk about our military men and women for sure. The gold standard in the business of being a hero. We talk about healthcare workers. We talk about first responders. We talk about world changers, Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa. We talk about teachers and coaches, moms and dads. We talk about all of these categories of heroes. And Gail, every single human being I've ever asked the question, what does a hero look like? They've always said, heroes are ordinary people who do extraordinary things. First time I heard it, I wrote it down. It seemed reasonable. I thought, yep, that's absolutely the right definition. But after I kept hearing it over and over again, something wasn't sitting right with me. Something didn't really make sense, because if you buy into this idea of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, you have to first convince yourself that you're ordinary in the first place. And I don't think that's how it was drawn up. You see, ordinary people doing extraordinary things means that we can go through life pretty much ordinary most of the time and occasionally do something extraordinary. I happen to believe that people were put here with talents, gifts, and abilities as unique as their fingerprints. I believe that people were put here to use those gifts, those talents in the service of others, to bring them to their work every day and pour it into what they do to serve other people. And what we've learned on this journey of more than a decade is that we've had the definition of a hero wrong. We believe that heroes are extraordinary people who choose not to be ordinary. Extraordinary people who choose not to be ordinary. And this changed everything for us. It's amazing when you become aware of something, you start to see it everywhere you go. I started looking, I've been looking for more than a decade. Around the globe, I've been looking for people who show up and they play at a higher level. They lead at a higher level. They love at a higher level. They parent at a higher level. And it's amazing when you're looking for something, you can absolutely find it, good or bad, right? In the midst of this crisis, there are people looking for things. There are people looking for bad things. There's people looking for good things. And you can absolutely find whatever it is that you're looking for. I started looking for these people. I want to know, how do they show up at the drive-thru or the dry cleaners, gas stations, grocery stores? How is it that some people show up and we're automatically drawn to them? We are drawn to them in a way that we'll vote with our dollars. We give them our money. We give them our time, our affection, our loyalty, our grace. There's something about how extraordinary people show up. And when they make a decision to not be ordinary, it looks so much different than everybody else. And you know, one of the things that I've learned about heroes see life completely different than everybody else. They see life through this lens of optimism. They see life through the lens of a compelling vision that they have for their life, for their business, for their family, for their friends. And, you know, I told you my wife, Lisa, she's one of my biggest heroes. Our son, Josh, and if you ever met Josh, he would tell you his name is Josh Brown. He thinks it's hyphenated, all one word. A lot of people know about an extraordinary visit that we had to Walt Disney World. They know about this encounter that we had with an executive chef, and she made him apple pancakes. But what a lot of people don't know is kind of the backstory of Josh's life. You know, when Josh was 5 years old, we sat in a school conference room, big mahogany table, doctors on one side, teachers on the other. We were scared young parents. We knew that we were going to get some news that we didn't want to hear. We had kind of suspected it, but we were afraid to say it out loud. And I'll never forget, a doctor spoke first. He said, "Mr. and Mrs. Brown, your son has autism. You need to ready yourself for the road ahead. It's going to be a steep climb. There's some things you need to understand about your son. He's uneducable in many ways. He will not learn like the other children. Mr. and Mrs. Brown, you need to understand your son most likely will not graduate high school. If he does, he will get a special education diploma." And Gail, I have to tell you, in that moment, I turned and I looked at Lisa, and the tears were streaming down her face, teardrops falling on the papers in her lap. And I remember thinking, boy, we sure have to be careful the vision that we cast for people in our lives. People will live up to or down to whatever label we place on them. And I remember as a father, I got angry. I became angry. I started thinking about everything my son wasn't going to do. I started thinking about the life he wasn't going to live. The one that I vicariously wanted to live through that boy had just vanished. He wasn't going to be the star little league shortstop like his dad was. He wasn't going to be the star quarterback and captain of the high school football team like his dad was not. And as I sat there playing these tapes in my mind about everything my son wasn't going to do, I looked back and the teardrops were gone. And it's amazing. I think moms get a little something extra, a little something more than dads. They're natural born leaders. They have natural born vision, especially when it comes to their babies. She sees that boy not as he is, but as he can be, which is the number one job of leadership and friendship and parenting. She sees that boy for all the hope and promise that was placed in him at birth. And I watched as this leader with the title of mother did something extraordinary. She took the storyline that life gave us and she started to rewrite it. She took the storyline that life had just given her son and she looked at her son and she said, "Cover your ears. I heard what he said, Josh, but that's not your destiny. His opinion does not have to become your reality." And she went to work and she planted a vision in that boy's mind that day. He was 5 years old. And it's amazing when you have a compelling vision for your life. All of a sudden the resources start to show up. And for 18 years, I've had a front row seat to watch this leader with the title of mother do her work. And the teachers, the tutors, the guides, the mentors, the coaches, all of the people who flowed into this kid's life, moved him from where he was to someplace new, took him places he could have never gotten to on his own. And in May of 2016, we were invited to a graduation ceremony. 300 kids would graduate from Gallatin High School in Gallatin, Tennessee. And we were there. We were in the upper deck with all the friends and the family. And we watched as 300 kids came into that auditorium. 300 kids came in. We were only looking for one. And I'll never forget, we saw him standing in the doorway, 6 feet tall. His cap was crooked. We knew he was ours. And he marched in with his classmates and he found his seat. And before he sat down, I'll never forget, he turned and he looked at his mom and dad and he smiled and he gave us a nod. And they started calling names. 300 names were called that night. We heard one name the entire night: Joshua Douglas Brown. And when that kid stood up, chill ran down my spine. I saw a young man stand up and he straightened his cap, which made me proud. And then his chin came up and his shoulders went back. And he started marching to the stage with confidence and purpose, bordering on swagger as he made his way to the stage. Halfway there, he grabbed the honors cords that were draped around his neck. Walking tall and proud, he made his way to that stage. Mom and I came from the upper deck and we were standing right there just off stage, our cameras locked and loaded to capture the moment when his foot hit the stage. And when his foot hit the stage, I heard the voice of my father. My father used to tell me when I was a boy, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. All that matters is what you believe. You see, the doctors didn't think my son could learn. Teachers didn't think he would graduate, much less with honors. But they underestimated what he believed. And he believed what he believed because a leader with the title of mother was willing to get down in the ditch and do the work It's not easy to become the best version of yourself. It's not easy to help somebody else become a better version of themselves. If it was easy, everybody would do it. If it was easy to get through a pandemic better than we went in, everybody would do it. If it was easy to be successful, everybody would do it. It's not easy. You see, you've got to be willing to get down in the ditch and roll your sleeves up and get dirty. See, they weren't there for the late night study sessions with Lisa and Josh. And listen, Lisa had to go back to school. School had changed a lot since we'd been there. She had to go back to school all over again. And she was there every single night working with that boy. She was there at the school making sure the IEP meetings happened. She was there at the school networking with the teachers and everybody there so that she could give her boy the best opportunity to win. They weren't there when mother and son couldn't be in the same room together. They weren't there when my son put his head in his hands and said, "Why doesn't my brain work?" And a leader with the title of mother leaned down and said, "Sweetheart, your brain's just fine. It takes a little more work to be special." Well, he marched across that stage and he shook that principal's hand and he got his real diploma. There was no asterisk on it anywhere. It was not a special education diploma. And I remember he walked down those stairs and I put my arms out to hug him and he walked by me to hug his mother, as he should. And I remember driving home. We were in the front seat. He was in the back. He was holding his diploma and he was smiling. I could see his face in the rearview mirror. And when we got home, we were sitting at the dinner table. He's still wearing his cap and gown and holding his diploma. And he pulled it down and he looked at me, Gail, and he said, "I did good, didn't I?" I said, "You did better than good, brother. You knocked it out of the park. Your mom and I love you so much and we're so proud of you." You see, one moment in time can change everything. Josh went on to college. Josh has gone on to do amazing things. He's in the process of buying a business right now and pursuing his dreams and his goals because of one moment in time when a hero with the title of mother was unwilling to accept the storyline that life gave her son. So many people get up every day. They take the storyline that life gives them. They take the storyline the government gives them, the weather, the government, the economy, the pandemic. They take the storyline that life gives them and they walk it out as their truth. And they never give one single thought to the fact that the pen is always in their hands. You know, heroes see life. They see life so differently. And I learned this early in my life. I was a young man. My first mentor in business was from the great state of Texas. You're sitting in Dallas. This guy was from Houston, Texas. His name was David. And David got a hold of me at a point in my life when I needed somebody to get a hold of me. I went through a really dark period in my life from age 13 to 16. I was betrayed by some adults that I trusted very much. Life got complicated. It got ugly, spiraled out of control. The yogurt had literally hit the fan. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I lived in my car. I was dragging that broken 13-year-old everywhere I went. I burned every bridge I walked across back then. I broke a lot of promises. I hurt a lot of people, developed some really bad habits. And like I said, by the time I was in my early 20s, I lived in my car. I'll never forget. I was sitting in that car contemplating life. Do I stay or do I go? If I was going to stay, I had to make some money. And I responded to a newspaper ad. Most of the people watching will remember what newspapers are. That's how you used to find jobs. We used to look in the newspaper. And I remember calling. They were looking for a salesperson. And mind you, I'd quit school in the 10th grade. I've never been to college. And on the other end of the phone was a crusty old sales guy named David. He was from South Texas. He was looking for a salesperson and I needed a job. And he was willing to take a chance on a broken 13-year-old kid. And I told him my whole story. I had no credentials. I had no training. And he said, "If you're willing to work hard, if you follow the system, if you'll do what I ask you to do, I can help you build something that you'll be proud of." And he took me under his wing and this guy started to shepherd me and he started to work with me and he started to mentor me. And it wasn't easy for him because every time I missed the mark, I'd grab that 13-year-old kid and I'd pull him right here to this moment. I'd dump him all over David. I used that 13-year-old kid for years as an excuse for not doing well. I used what life had given me as a reason for not getting better. And I used it every single time I missed the mark. I'd use it as an excuse and I'd dump it all over David. And one day he said, "I don't want to hear that story anymore. I could tell it better than you've told me so many times." He said, "You told me that you wanted to go someplace new. If you want to go someplace new, I'll take you. But if you want to go somewhere where you've already been, I can't help you." He said, "The past is a place of reference, not a place of residence." And he kept dripping on me. and he kept working on me. This guy became a mentor, became like a second father to me. In fact, when I look in the mirror, he's one of the first faces that I see, stands next to my own dad. And I'll never forget the day that my hero called me and he said he had cancer. Stage 4 KB. It's in my lungs, my throat, my windpipe. Doc says I should get a haircut. It'll be my last. He's given me 6 months to live. And I remember asking him, I said, David, you have 6 months to live. What are you going to do? And Gail, I swear, he said, I'm moving in with my mother-in-law. He said, that'll be the longest 6 months of my life. It was one of the funniest things I'd ever heard in my life, but it was so, in that moment, it was so typical of David. He had such a beautiful sense of humor. And in the midst of crisis, in the midst of challenge, he always relied on his humor and his perspective. He was the most optimistic human being I ever knew. You know, he taught me how to sell, but most importantly, he taught me how to see. See, he took the storyline called cancer that life had given him, and he started to rewrite it. He didn't accept it as his truth. And I said, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to go to work on me. He said, lung cancer doesn't just happen. I did this. I got cocky. I got arrogant, thought I was bulletproof, thought the rules didn't apply to me. He said, I'm going to go to work on me. I think I could beat it. I said, what can I do? He said, pray. So I did. 10 years after a 6-month diagnosis, we're sitting on his patio in South Texas. He had beaten cancer 4 times in 10 years. Letters from 3 doctors who said the cancer's gone. We don't know where it went. And it was back for a 5th time, back with a vengeance. I was living in Nashville, Tennessee by then. He was still in Texas. He called me, he said, KB, it's back and I'm tired. I'd like to see you before I go. I packed in 5 minutes. I made a 14-hour trip in 12. David didn't have any boys. He had 2 girls. When I walked through the front door of the house, Stacy was on one side of the recliner and Shelly was on the other. And the guy in the recliner didn't look like anybody that I knew, but I knew his voice. We never, ever forget the voice of influence in our lives. We never, ever forget the voice of leadership in our lives. And he looked up over his glasses at me and he said, my boy's home. Now all my kids are here. And they helped him out of the chair and he met me halfway across the living room floor and he put his arms around me and he squeezed me tight. He said, I'm glad you're home, son. I could feel his whiskers on my cheek. They were wet as he started to cry. He said, let's go outside for a minute. I want to talk to you. And we went outside and we sat on the patio and sipped sweet tea and other things. And we talked about old times. We laughed, we cried. 2 hours went just like that. And then the conversation got serious. He reached over to grab my arm and he missed. He actually grabbed my foot. And David was a really proud man. He would never want me to know that he wasn't aiming for my foot. So he just held my foot. And he looked at me, Gail, and he said, I'm proud of you, son. I'm really proud of you. Those are the most powerful words on planet Earth next to I love you. And we never, ever outgrow the need to hear them. He said, I'm proud of you, son. You've come a long way from that 13-year-old you were dragging around all those years ago. You've got a great career, an amazing family. That son of yours is something special. I said, yeah, I know. I made it. And he said, I didn't say you made it, son. He said, don't you ever say that again. He said, I'm not going to be here to remind you of what we've learned together. I don't need you walking around here thinking you're somebody or you've become something that you haven't. He said, I'm going to tell you something, son. As long as there's a breath in your body, you've got work to do. As long as there's a breath in your body, there's a version of you that you haven't even met yet, a version that the rest of the world desperately needs. And when he said those words, he looked away and he looked at the ground and the tears started streaming down his face. I'd never seen him cry before that day. I reached over and I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, what's wrong? He said, I'm scared, dude. He said, I'm really scared. I said, come on, man, you don't have to be afraid to die. He looked at me, Gail. He said, I'm not afraid to die. Son, not for 1 minute am I afraid to die. But after 64 years on this planet, I'm scared to death. Nobody will even know I was here. And those words broke my heart. This guy not only changed my life, he saved it. And here he sits on his deathbed thinking nobody will even know he was here. And I really just stopped by today to tell you and everybody watching what I told my best friend that day. You see, heroes show up in ways that we can't even imagine, disguised as everyday people, disguised as the people in our lives, disguised as total strangers sometimes. And I sat there on the patio that day with my hero, watching him sob with his head in his hands, thinking that nobody would even know he had been here. He said, Kevin, for 64 years, I've been racing through life, chasing something that turns out was right in front of me the whole time. He said, for 64 years, Kevin, I failed to show up for the people in the moments that mattered the most to me. Kevin, I don't think I did it right. I don't think anybody will know that I existed. And what I told my best friend that day, and this is something that I believe with my whole heart, I believe this with every fiber of who I am. I believe that this little space called now and the people who enter it do not happen by accident. I think the people who enter your life and mine come to us quite by assignment. But the fact of the matter is, most of the time we're so consumed with what happened yesterday, so freaked out about what might happen tomorrow, that we've missed this little space, these fleeting moments called now. We miss the opportunity to influence. You see, when people enter this moment, I believe they come to get a little something that they can't get anywhere else. A little piece of the extraordinary person that you are, a little piece of something, and it has nothing to do with what you do for a living. The truth is, anybody can do what we do for a living. The fact that most people show up and they do it with excellence, the fact that people show up and knock it out of the park for the people they serve, that's all icing on the cake. People don't come to you for what you do. They come to you for who you are. They come to you to experience something that they cannot get from anybody else. And the only way we can deliver it is to stand in this moment with them and give it to them fully and completely. I really just came to ask two questions. First question, can you look in the mirror and see the faces of the people who make you better? Can you see the faces of the people who helped you get where you are? None of us got here on our own. We had a lot of help. If you can see those faces in the mirror before your head hits the pillow tonight, I would ask you to thank one of them before you can't. But the real question is, who looks in the mirror and sees your face? Who looks in the mirror and says, I'm better because you showed up, better because you didn't blow through this moment to get to something obviously more important than me, better because you took the time to hear my story even though you didn't have the time or the interest, better because you helped me write my story when you didn't feel like it. You gave me a smile even though you were dealing with your own garbage. Who looks in the mirror and sees your face? Because here's what you don't know. The next person that enters this space called now, you don't know that they didn't just leave the doctor and get a diagnosis they didn't see coming. You don't know that they didn't just leave their house to find out he or she packed everything and they're gone. You don't know that they didn't just put their 13-year-old kid in rehab for the third time and they're at the end of their rope. You see, you think you know why they're there. You don't. And the only way you can is to be fully invested and connected in this moment with them at the cellular level, here, not here. You know, John Maxwell says when we die, they will summarize our entire life in one sentence and they'll carve it in a piece of stone. Doesn't it make sense for you to decide what they're going to write on your rock? Don't leave it to the people you leave behind. They will get emotional and mess it up. They'll put stupid stuff on there. I've seen it. You decide the through line for your life. Listen, we spend more time on our company taglines and our logos than we do the through line for our life. You decide what your life is about and then get up every day for the rest of it and walk it out. Pour it into the people that you serve and serve with. Show up and be a hero to the people at work and at home. I promise you, if you'll show up in these moments, it will make a difference. It will leave a mark that cannot be erased. And if ever there was a time this world needed heroes, oh my goodness, it's now. And not only does the world need heroes, the world needs your hero. The world needs that special person you are to show up and give us everything you've got, to be a better version today than you were yesterday. Listen, there's no staying the same. We're either getting better or we're sliding backwards. There's no staying the same. We don't get that option. We don't have that luxury of complacency. We're either moving forward or we're sliding backwards, and the choice is always ours to make. You know, I have a sign in my office that says, always be yourself, unless you can be Batman. And then you should always be Batman.
Kevin, this has just been unbelievable. I'm so uplifted. I'm so inspired. I mean, what great stories about vision, about the importance of being someone's hero. I mean, I appreciate it so much. I think it's what everybody needed during this time.
Well, thank you.
I just think you do so much to make the world a more positive place, and I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Anyone out there listening?
I'm lucky to do what I do.
Yeah, and you're so good at it. And that's something I want to tell people about. I wanted Kevin to deliver his message, which we've done. But he and I are going to stay on for a little after the show. So if you're in the event planning world and you're curious what Kevin's seeing is differences between presenting virtually versus presenting live in front of an audience, some of his hybrid experiences, please stay on. I know for some people you just wanted to be here for the message and you got that, but we'll talk about some behind the scenes stuff. If anyone wants to bring Kevin in to speak to their organization, please reach out to GBA Speakers. He is available. And as you can see, you know that he has a studio set up in his home, and he is available to do virtual presentations until we can meet again in person. And then if you're enjoying the Motivational Monday, come back with us on Monday, August 10th. We're going to have Frank Luntz, the pollster, who's going to give us insights about our upcoming presidential election. So with that, Kevin, let's talk a little bit about behind the scenes.
Absolutely, let's go.
All right, so before March 12th, if I booked you to speak, it meant getting in the car, going to the airport, taking your shoes off. Well, you probably don't have to take your shoes off, you probably have a higher status. But you had to get to a hotel, you had to check in, you had to do sound check, you're away from your family. You could only do, well, you can do 2 speeches in one day, even if they're live. But most human speakers could only do 1. How has your world changed since government restrictions and there are no meetings?
Yeah. So speaking of March 12th, I was in Philadelphia. I was 2 hours from being on stage, and I got the call from CEO client and said, look, man, we have to shut it down. We can't do it. And they sent a car, took me to the airport. There was nobody in the airport. And, you know, up to that point, we had already done 40 events in the first quarter. And so we were on pace. We were on pace for another 100+ events, you know, this year. You know, we just had our head down. We've been working, and I knew that something was happening with COVID, but I hadn't really bought in fully to everything that was happening. And I've been home since March 12th, with the exception of a week ago. I went and did a hybrid event in Nashville, Tennessee, and everything changed. Everything changed. I've been home since March 12th. We had to shift. I said this during the call earlier. What COVID-19 has done in our business and a lot of others, it's revealed our weaknesses, right? We were so busy doing a lot of moving product and doing things the old fashioned way that we weren't ready for this new reality. And the truth is, when times were good, we should have been preparing to do virtual events. We should have been preparing to do more video-based learning. We should have been preparing for a lot of things because the future is bringing that anyway. COVID just forced us to deal with it right now.
Tell us a little bit about the hybrid event. So I know you traveled to do a hybrid event for your former employer, right?
Yeah, that was fun. I retired at the end of 2016 after 20 years with a company called ServPro. I spent a great time there. They are family to me. They will always be family to me. And they invited me back for this hybrid event, which is the best part about what we're learning about this virtual world is that there are a lot of ways to serve people. We can't just get locked into, okay, it's a Zoom call and that's it. There are so many ways to serve our clients, and we have an opportunity to help co-create. You and I have talked about this a lot. What you do on your side with GDA, what I can do on my side to help co-create an event for a client that might look completely different than somebody else's virtual event. So with ServPro, I was live on the ground in Nashville, Tennessee, in their auditorium, had maybe 75 people in the room, socially distanced apart, and everybody was safe. Everybody was wearing masks except the speaker. But it was live streamed to thousands of associates and franchisees, employees in the field. So we had an opportunity to have a live audience, which is great for me as a speaker. I love feedback. I love seeing smiling faces. I love hearing laughter. But then we can live stream and keep it safe. So the hybrid event is really, really intriguing to me. And I think that's going to be a great interim step back to full live events.
How do you get feedback virtually? If you're someone who, likes that interaction with audience, how are you compensating?
I've learned to laugh at my own stuff, and I've learned to rely on past experiences. And getting good at talking to a camera that's an art form all unto itself. It's very, very different than being on stage and rolling with the flow and doing things. And what we're learning in this virtual environment, and I was resistant to this, and you know this, Early on with COVID-19, I said, I'm absolutely not doing virtual events. This isn't going to last long. We'll be back out on the road. And how narrow my vision was then, how bad my thinking was about this. But I was resistant because it was change, and it meant getting uncomfortable, and it meant doing things in a different way. So I had to step back and get perspective and say, wait a minute. The goals haven't changed. The goals are still to impact people. The goals are still to move organizations forward. The goals are still to help people. So the goals haven't changed. The path has changed. And so I had to have a talk with myself, a motivational talk, and start to figure out, look, there are other ways to do virtual. There's the live hybrid. There's this type of event on a Zoom call, which is very rewarding. You do get some feedback. At least I get to see your face, or get to see other people's faces. I can see them laugh, even if I can't hear them laugh. That's good. We're seeing a lot of pre-recorded keynotes. And one of the things that we've done is we call it a keynote conversation. This is a much more intimate space that we're in right here with this camera. So I can't be as animated and use some of the intensity that I use on a big stage, but I can bring it down and use my tone and inflection differently to have this conversation. So we're seeing a lot of pre-recorded. The pre-recorded allows us to customize in a very big way for the customer. We can put their logo on it. We can brand it. We can do some things so that has the ability to live after the event. And we're seeing great success with that. We're doing what we call a leadership mini series, where it's a series of phone call meetings like this with senior leadership groups, doing some executive coaching and some learning together, 30-minute calls with 15 minutes of Q&A on a specific subject. They choose from a list of 5 or 6 subjects. And then we kind of deep dive into that for 30 minutes. And then we do some Q&A around that. We're doing half-day leadership retreats. We've got some half-day events coming up, and we're doing those virtually, and we're going to build breaks in and do some things, again, custom content, a lot of it molded around what people are dealing with today. I mean, if ever we needed heroes as leaders, as frontline workers, as human beings, as neighbors, as community leaders, man, it's now. And so what a great time. We've been talking about this for 10 years. I'm just glad everybody else is catching up.
So at what point should the client and the speaker get together to start this co-creation?
I think the sooner the better. Because here's what happens. A lot of times what we're seeing, and we've done dozens of these already. We've got a full slate next month, September. We're seeing a lot of our live events convert virtual, which we're just excited to still be able to impact people. But the sooner we can talk, as soon as we can get on the phone and do a 3-way with you all and the client, so much better, because everybody's flying blind. We're all learning this. I've had the blessing of seeing it done every way imaginable, really great ways and some not so great ways. And the truth of the matter is, if we have technology failures, if I can hear it thundering outside right now here, I know that there's a storm moving in. If we have things that happen, then that experience, we had one where they left all the microphones open so you could hear what everybody on the call was doing. Nobody heard the speaker because all the microphones were open. Every piece of paper that was drug across a microphone, animals walking into people's bedroom/office space, and all of this stuff. So we've had the luxury and the blessing of seeing it done a lot of different ways. So if we get on the phone, we might be able to put some options on the table for the client that they hadn't even thought of. And so it just helps with that planning process, again, to co-create something that has a lasting impact, lasting value, and helps them convey what it is they're trying to tell their folks.
We were talking earlier, I was commenting on how sharp you looked, and you were mentioning that, first you were trying to figure it out. Like, do I wear a ball cap? Do I wear shorts? Talk a little bit about that. I think it's interesting.
Well, I told you, I said I actually have pants on.
Yeah.
And you never know when the camera's going to fall. You never know when technology is going to do whatever. It's got a mind of its own. So I just feel like everybody in my world started out trying to figure it out, right? We're wearing ball caps and t-shirts and, being a little more casual than perhaps we would on stage. And where I've landed on this is we've come back to kind of the center of who we are. We've come back to our brand. Our brand is always to be in a suit. Our brand is always to look our best. That's when I feel my best. I'm not saying that that's right for everybody, But I do believe when you are packaged right, when you are on brand for your brand, I do think you perform better. And this is all about our clients. This is all about the people that we serve. So if we're going to show up, I want to feel good about showing up. I have dress shoes on, I have pants on, I've got my jacket, I've got my hanky in my pocket. And I think it's important how we show up. And it helps me. This is how I would be on stage. And again, the goals haven't changed. The path has changed. So I just happen to be on stage in my living room.
I have one last question. I think people are trying to navigate, do we leave Q&A open in a chat box? Do we do Zoom webinar so that you only see the moderator, the host, and the speaker? Do we do Zoom meeting and let individual people come up and ask questions? Really, we've always had these same questions in a ballroom. Do we have a mic runner? Do we toss the little thing around? What are you finding that you like, particularly when it comes to feeling like you're engaging with the audience? How do you like to interact?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways to do it. My keynote doesn't really lend itself to Q&A. My keynote, the full keynote, is there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of laughter, there's a lot of thinking that takes place. And so we don't typically see Q&A. However, depending on the client's needs, depending on the venue that we're using, I may not be doing a keynote. We may just be having conversations around some key topic ideas, and we're weaving some stories into that. And now I'm interacting with the group. I love the interaction. I love to have questions, but it has to be in a controlled environment. If you get people talking, you get a lot of noise and you get a lot of things going on. I think it's better to have a moderator fielding the questions in the chat box. That way they have some control over the quality of the program and the quality of the product. Otherwise, it gets too noisy and get a little bit disruptive.
Perfect. Well, thanks for staying on. I am still laughing about you telling me, no, I'm not going to be doing this virtual. And now you've got this menu of offerings and you're doing double and triple headers in a day. So I'm proud of you for making it.
Thank you. Thanks for being in my corner.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye, everybody. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Gail.
Bye-bye.